Hello, hello.
All
Today we're
right.
joined by Aaron Ross, the man, the legend, author of Predictable Revenue, From Impossible to Inevitable, and a great mentor, friend, startup coach. He is the
Lost you
guy.
guys.
Welcome to the Jam Sessions, Aaron. For those who are not familiar with our gym sessions, it's a mix of presentations, interviews, and webinars. The idea is to bring great experts and innovators that we are fans. The hashtag is Jam Session. Aaron, glad to have you today.
Yeah, Diego, hey, happy to be here. By the way, I'm really not good at guitar. I noticed you got some, and also jam session as a tag. So I'm learning. I'm just learning.
Oh, what have you been playing lately?
I'm learning. Is it "You Shook Me All Night Long"? AC/DC now.
Oh,
This is like the beginner version. Nothing fancy yet.
we're
So
gonna spend some time.
yeah, but it's been fun. It's just kind of like a hobby I put off for a long time. I'm picking up for a little bit of sanity, but I do enjoy it when I practice my 2 minutes a day,
Perfect. I
maybe 3
also have
minutes.
15 minutes every day. Okay, let's get started. So, Aaron, you have one of the most inspiring histories out there. You started a company, didn't go well. You went on, you started $100 million+ sales division at Salesforce. Then you went out to launch predictable revenue. Very curious to learn about these early days at Salesforce because it ties to our topic today. How was that structuring of the team? How did your career evolve?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when I started at Salesforce.com, it was still a small, relatively small company, about 150 people, 25 million in revenue. I mean, small compared to how it is now, because it's probably 50,000 people and 15 billion. And at the time, the they had inside sales people, and they had field. They just hired a bunch of field sales people. They had the role people who were responding to website leads. So they had the beginnings of sales specialization, right? And this was the idea of, I think this is one of the most fundamental things that was around before Salesforce, around before me, but Salesforce took it to an extreme. And then I, of course, have been talking about it for years and years and years. But this is the idea that I don't know any sports team where a coach would tell it's football or soccer, everybody should attack and everybody should defend. At the time, Salesforce was still telling its salespeople everyone should close business and everyone should prospect. They had already had other teams to respond to website leads and take care of customers. But I think what happened here was so different was all these senior people who were hired who were not prospecting. They couldn't do it. They weren't any good at it. It wasn't working. And so by specializing dedicated prospectors, adding another job where that's all they did and they get really good at it, helped. More specialization, like people doing fewer things better, helped add that extra. I would say they didn't double Salesforce's growth rate. But it was a lot. It was probably an extra 14, almost double their growth rate. So that's where it was. It was in the early days, but adding more specialization helped it even. They were already growing, but it just helped go even faster and with more predictability.
And I'm very curious about specifically marketing and sales alignment in the early days of Salesforce. It was a new category, cloud CRM. How was it? Like, when did you guys realize that you could go faster and explore new ways of lead generation? How was the relationship between the sales and marketing teams?
Well, for a long time at Salesforce.com, most of the leads really were generated through either word of mouth. So word of mouth or press PR, public relations, because Mark Benioff was a genius at marketing and public relations. So, or outbound. So usually outbound did probably most of the bigger companies, and word of mouth or public relations did, well, sorry, word of mouth kind of did everything. And then for bigger companies, outbound really helped drive that. And for the smaller companies, public relations also helped drive it. You know, for a long time, they really didn't do much with digital paid advertising. I'd say the other big thing that Salesforce did was having city tours, where for I don't know how many cities, they would just have meetups constantly, like dozens of city tours, meetups around, starting in the United States, but then around the world. Because the idea was if you can get customers and prospects in the same room with Salesforce people, and they're all learning together, everybody wins. So I feel like they weren't that creative. I mean, that was probably doing a few things really well. And then they added Dreamforce. So there's like events were really big. Like events were always really big. Word of mouth, customer success, probably, you know, huge. Outbound, and public relations. So beyond that, those were always the core that really drove Salesforce. And by now they've done a lot, but you know, they didn't do a lot of blogging. They didn't do a lot of social media. There's a lot of stuff that was around. In fact, blogging, when I was there, blogging was banned for employees, at least. I had a private blog. I was actually technically not allowed to have one. I was experimenting the early parts of the predictable revenue book. But so they were, I think, slow to embrace a lot of those techniques, but yeah, they've always, Mark Benioff is he's just a genius at marketing and other things.
Got it. I wanted to touch a little bit in the role of content in your personal career. You've always been very active in sharing your ideas, and I believe it's fair to say that you're honorary content marketing.
True.
How did your digital presence evolve over time?
Well, it's funny. My whole business and everything I do is around outbound prospecting, but my own leads, almost all our business comes from content marketing. But that's a different story. I think I personally have always been pretty open about myself, and you know, I don't remember when I started doing a blog and sharing it, but I started probably 2004, 2005. It was back when it wasn't allowed. And then I started sharing it more and more. And I think a lot of my blogging would talk about myself or my family when I had one. And I've never, so I think we all have to focus on our strengths. Like there's 1,000 things you can do for marketing, right? I've never really been into social media. Like I'm sure I know how valuable it is. It's just not my thing. So I'm not consistent about posting. Most of the posting that happens that's consistent is from my team. I might help create stuff, but I'm not great about video. I mean, I don't mind doing it. It's just not something I really have. It's not my go-to. My go-to is writing. So for blogging and books, that's kind of been my go-to. And I think everyone, you know, it's hard sometimes because everyone feels like you have to do everything all the time. I have to do videos and write and post and You gotta, at least for me, I just can't. So I got to stick to primarily the thing I know best, writing and speaking. Because for me, speaking, like writing is one half and speaking. So writing is kind of a way to kind of create stuff. Speaking is a way to force myself to pull it together into more clarity. So that's how Predictable Revenue, the book, was created, just blogging and writing, and then doing talks, whether for or 200, to kind of force the clarity and to simplify the ideas. But whatever your strength is, you gotta find it and stick to it.
Yeah, no, your book was one of the first sales books I read as a founder, and I'm more on the technology side. So we were in the early days, we really had to learn, and I would say that it really changed the way I understood sales. You took a more engineering friendly approach, which I love. In talking about assembling new sales machine. So let's say I'm a start founder, or I am executive at a big company launching a new division or a new product. What has changed since though Predictable Revenue was 10 years ago?
Yeah, it's 9, but yeah.
9 years ago. What has changed and what remains the same if I'm starting?
Well, one thing that hasn't changed enough is still salespeople, like managers and companies who expect salespeople to do everything, like respond to leads, prospect, close, manage customers. The fastest growing companies in the world don't do that. They specialize, but honestly, most companies don't do that yet. And that makes everything easier when you move that way, specializing your salespeople. So I would like that to change more. But really the thing that has changed the most is technology. And there's been a ripple effect. Like as technology becomes easier to create, so there's just more, basically think an explosion. It's like a volcano of apps. And that has also resulted in an explosion of content and messages and an explosion of channels. So, 30 years ago, it was just the phone and direct mail, right? And then you add email, and then you add LinkedIn, and then you add WhatsApp, and then there'll be something else to add in the future too. And so everyone's getting more messages from more directions, and it's just that overwhelm and is increasing, right? There was 500 sales apps 5 years ago. Now there's 5,000. And in 5 more years, there'll be 20,000. So that's what changes. Everyone now is navigating this overwhelm of too many choices, too many messages. And everyone, as a consequence, what you find is people they really want you to tell them, most people want you to be able to just tell them what to do. Like it's all very confusing. Can you just tell me what to do to make this work? So the more any company, whether you're a software or service, SaaS product, can kind of give your customer trusted advice to tell them how to be successful, and it's useful and they believe you, like, and you're building that relationship, that's really what they need, and they will, buy the product and use it the right way. So it's kind of like what now more than ever is important is, so to counteract all the overwhelm, you need basically like honest advice and customer success, or let me say focused advice and customer success. Like, who's our customer? How can we make them successful? And really, what's like the right amount of content? More is not always better. More can just make it worse. It's like, what's the right amount of content to help them? Like that, the focus. So that's the big change in 9 years, and it's going to continue. That's not something that's ever going to stop. It's going to be more. So it's about how do you adapt to that versus try to hope that there's going to be less stuff in the future, which is not true.
Yeah, it's all about attention and messaging more than ever, right? Specialization still plays a big role, but we also have to tailor the message and personalize significantly.
Yep, personalization, focus. One more thing is too, personality. There's personalization, which is I'm sending a message or to one or a few people, and how do I make it personal to them? But there's also personality. And one thing I've seen missing, especially this year with all the Zoom calls, is people just being very, you can kind of see our people are very dry and boring. They're not putting themselves out there. For me, I've always talked about my family and kids. For other people, maybe it could be talk about hobbies, or it could be dressing in funny costumes, or the way you write, or there's all kinds of ways that you can add personality to your sales message, whatever it is you do. And that's something that needs to change and needs to grow for people to make sure that you are connecting with your audience.
Totally. And one thing that this explosion of apps, both from the sales side and marketing side, it makes the divisions between what is marketing and sales more blurry, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you see the collaboration of marketing and sales departments evolving over time?
Yeah, well, there's been a big trend, has been the creation of CRO, or so basically Chief Revenue Officer or VP of Revenue, right? Someone who oversees sales and marketing. That's one thing that can help. Another thing that can help is creating, if you have a B2B company, creating the inbound, let's just call it the lead response role. So it's or called inbound SDR. So it's a junior salesperson that for all the leads that marketing is generating or word of mouth, they're all coming in. You need a junior person to review all those, respond to all of them. That's the only way you're going to get a lot of consistent follow-up and touches of the leads. If you're a marketing person and you're generating leads and you're sending them straight to your salespeople and you're complaining as to why they're not following up, they're just not going to. That's not their job. It's like you need a dedicated person to respond to them. So that's another one. The SDR roles are an incredible bridge between sales and marketing, whether inbound or outbound. And the third one is measuring marketing on a metric that matters to sales. So that should be typically like sales qualified lead, sales accepted lead. Thank you. This is my coffee delivery. It's going to be a little bit different, but if you think about marketing and they're measured on visits or could be new leads generated or marketing qualified leads, none of that matters to sales. So the only metric that really matters to sales first is how many appointments are getting into the hands of sales that are being accepted. So that's something that marketing should aspire to be measured on, and maybe revenue if it's a very short sales cycle. But those are the three big things, right? One, revenue head who sales and marketing report to, SDR roles to do inbound and outbound. The third is having marketing on a quota with a metric that sales cares about.
And if I'm a marketer or a VP marketing or a CMO, and I want to empower my prospecting or inbound response teams, what are some of the best practices you've seen lately?
Okay, well, first I gotta say, really common mistake that if you have an SDR team, so SDR, sales development rep, that's that junior salesperson that is either responding to website leads if they're an inbound SDR, or you can call them an LDR, lead development rep, or they're doing outbound prospecting and they're passing appointments to the salespeople. Common mistake is company hires some 2, 3, 10 SDRs, right? And they do all the lead generation jobs for the salespeople, but it's a mix of inbound lead response and prospecting. These junior salespeople, you need to separate that job. The lead response is a completely different job than outbound prospecting. They just sound similar because there's appointments and there's calls and emails, but the methodology, the mindset, the metrics, the comp, everything else is different. They need to be separate, or else or outbound will not work unless you have dedicated prospectors. So that's number one. Sorry, I think I got off track of what the actual question was. I know that was answered to the question, but
no, but go ahead. I was mentioning that this is a very common mistake. I personally,
it's a huge mistake.
Because the mindset of the prospect is completely different when you are in an inbound response team. You are actively answering to attention that already is there. When it comes to outbound, you have to manufacture attention, and when you mix this, you have unpredictable revenue.
It's true. So I saw a report here in the United States that 75% of companies with SDRs have them mixing inbound and outbound. So that can be okay if most of what they do is inbound in terms of responding to marketing leads. If you want significant results from outbound, predictable results from outbound prospecting, you need people dedicated to that. That's the only way to really do it.
And for marketing to support outbound prospecting strategies. So let's say we have a outbound prospecting team. We want to give them materials and content to perform better. What have you seen in terms of best practices? Any good example you've seen lately?
Yeah, well, I think ideally you have a head of marketing who understands that outbound is different and that it's a new way. Like if they're new to it, they realize, wow, it's something new to learn about. It's a different way to think about my ideal customer profile, because for outbound, your ideal customer profile has to be much more narrow, right? It's more of like a laser. So for general like marketing, you can have like a very broad ideal customer profile for just what lead generation, but for outbound, it needs to be very specific. Messaging, right? If you do case studies and the way you write emails, it's all very different. Similar in a way of, it's almost like if you've been a marathon runner and you've won championships, you could be amazing, but then you start to pick up swimming. So you still have a very fit body, but the technique is completely different. So that's kind of how marketers need to think about outbound. I might have great qualities, but it's a whole new technique, and I have a lot to learn. That's a way to approach it, because the metrics are different. Really commonly, a marketer might ask, well, how do I measure the lead response rate? Like, that's not an outbound metric. It's not really useful. So it's a new language they have to learn. That's one. It's just that beginner's mind. Two, they can do a lot to help create a insightful, specific, ideal target or ideal customer profile. Commonly, marketing teams help create the lists and the databases, or at least get access to them for the sales team. So I think too, the last part is when you have marketing and marketing leads, and you've got an outbound team, there's a lot of coordination they need to do, or attribution. Because pretty commonly, there's a lot of teamwork, because commonly, if there's a prospector who's emailing or calling a company, that company may not respond back to them. They might go to the website and register for a demo. And so to get the attribution right in terms of where this lead come from, the marketing team has to work with sales on kind of like rules of engagement and attribution. So you have clarity on knowing the ROI of your programs or the lead source with accuracy.
Got it.
It's a little bit of advanced stuff for a lot of companies. So
yeah, one thing that it's helping us and showing good results is having interactive experiences like ROI calculators for a specific set of customers, where we send that to a specific vertical, the customer interacts with that, you collect some data, and you get a richer database with first-party data for engaging. It's been working well for us.
Yeah, makes sense. I think too, you're seeing is a lot of, not everyone, but a lot of people want you to give them the tools to kind of tell them what to do. Like, make it easy for me. Because it's just can be so overwhelming to research something. There are some people who want to research everything and they do the free trial. Great. Well, a lot of people don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Like, if you can I'd rather talk to someone for 10 minutes and can you just tell me what you're doing here? I don't want to fiddle around with some product. I mean, can you just show me that? And there's a lot of people like me.
Totally. No, yeah. People, specifically the larger enterprise buyers, they are, they have less time and attention, and they prefer you you have to do part of the job for him to a certain degree.
Just hold my hand. Right, make it easy.
One interesting question we got here from Paul. Aaron, how different is Salesforce today from the one sales-wise? Is the methodology in place today the same one as you kicked off there?
That's a great question. I don't know about today because it's been 15. Well, I left 14 years ago. I know that as of like 5 years ago, they were using a lot of the same approaches and process and culture with the outbound side. I should check in. I'm not totally sure. Let's say Salesforce today is so big, so complicated. I'm guessing they probably have 50,000 people. And what I've seen, because I've worked with companies like SAP or Oracle, talking to like Microsoft, is that once you get past a certain size, it becomes so hard to make any changes internally. It's impossible. I don't know how it's just so complicated. So I don't know. I'm going to go find out sometime soon in the next few weeks or months and go see what they're doing these days.
I visited them around 2 years ago. I met with one prospecting leader there, in overall, the same fundamentals still applied when I had this conversation.
Yeah. Well, I would say that the people never change. One thing that hasn't changed in 10 years or 50 years or won't change is kind of a lot of the people. Again, their attention, there are certain things, and this is we wrote about in the Impossible to Inevitable book, like the dinosaur brain. And so there's definitely like people can only handle a certain amount of complexity, right? So it's kind of like 100 years ago in London, the average commute time or commute speed was like 5 miles an hour by horse and buggy, right? And 100 years later, with Teslas, the average commute speed is like 5 miles an hour. So no matter how the technology changes, it kind of like negates itself because, you know, there's just more of it. And so it creates more problems, more solutions, and you're kind of left with the same human situation. So.
Yeah, no, some fundamentals never change. And
Yeah.
I think it's very explicit in predictable revenue, the approach of being helpful, gathering attention. That's something that it's the most important fundamental in sales for me. Got another question here from Daniel. He mentioned that your book, Predictable Revenue, is outstanding. What are your thoughts on the spin selling methodology? Do you think it works?
You know, I haven't used it myself, but I've heard great things about it. So yes, sure it works. I've heard great things about, I feel like spin's probably one of the more famous ones. So I think whatever, you know, if you read 2 or 3 sales books like that, you generally will know enough to make your own version because they're all very similar. Like, again, one of the things that has not changed over the years is the basic sales process. You meet somebody, you find out what they're doing, you kind of you show them what you're doing, you propose something, and you conclude it. Right? There's a little more complicated with big companies, but that's just essentially the same thing. So I've heard, so yes, I'm sure spin is a great thing, and I would only recommend it because I've heard other people say it's great.
Got it.
I don't read a lot of books, actually, business books or sales books. I read a bunch, part of the story at Salesforce, I read a bunch of books there, I tried a bunch of stuff, and just nothing ever worked. So I just threw them all away and started creating my own thing.
My personal story, I think your book was one among the first sales books I read, and I learned a lot from it. When we interacted and you provided some guidance, was also very helpful. For me, it's on the list of, I love both, but I had my first sales experience and was one of the most inspiring in the early days for me. And that was actually my next question for you. I know you just said that you don't read a lot of books, but what other things should I read if I'm a techie or I am an inexperienced sales person and I want to be successful? Doesn't need to be a book, but resources. Should I start studying?
Yeah, well, I have heard really good things about, there's the book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I think if you're a founder, primarily, and if you haven't done it before, you don't realize how challenging it is to start a company and actually make it successful. And it takes a lot longer than you think. So I would honestly tell anyone, again, especially if you're a founder or an executive or want to be one, to read the book. In English, it's our book with Jason Lemkin, From Impossible to Inevitable. That's a lot. Or fromimpossible.com. There's a new edition coming out in Portuguese. It's called, in that language, Hipercrescimento. And again, that's the idea of taking a lot of kind of the best ideas that Jason Lemkin have seen and put in one place as a growth Bible. I would say, lastly, the 2 books that were really influential on me, and I think are timeless books. I read them at Salesforce, and I still think about them. One, and this is really, one was called The Toyota Way. In essence, it's about Toyota, how they created a manufacturing machine of a company. And that can apply to sales, but also to anything else like marketing or development. I just like the way they thought. and the other book was called Wooden. It's really working with people. It's a little blue book. John Wooden was the most winningest college basketball coach, and just the way he worked with his team was very inspiring to me. Right? I'll give one sample is like, make sure that if you practice hard, then the game is easy. Kind of just very compelling. So those would be the books that I would probably go to, again, especially if you are a founder, a leader, or want to be one. If you just, one last thing is that if you're just someone who wants to be successful, one of the ideas in the From Impossible to Inevitable book is the idea that sales is a life skill, right? If you want to accomplish anything in life, you need to learn how to sell yourself or a product or an idea. It's not something you're born with. It's not something that only, a lot of people are embarrassed to sell. A lot of people don't feel good about it for many reasons. But if you really want to achieve things or make progress with yourself, sales is a life skill. Treat it like, you can treat it like a guitar. You can learn to play the guitar. It may not be a natural, I'm not, but you can also learn how to be great at sales. You don't have to be a natural, but you need it to succeed.
No, I couldn't agree more. I would say if I could add two more resources that really helped me.
Yeah.
I really like the Sandler. I did some Sandler audiobook trainings and very good for the fundamentals when you're not started. And
I've heard that too. Yeah.
Another great and powerful, a lot more on the personal skill building. Dale Carnegie's How to Make Friends and Influence People. It's I think it's a very powerful, super simple, but I couldn't find anything more practical as well in there.
Yeah. Remember to smile.
Yeah, always. And so you launched the first book. You went on to the From the Impossible to Inevitable, and in between both, if I understand correctly, I heard that you launched a sales book, a children's book. Is that correct?
Yeah. Did you? There is I don't want to call it a secret book, but I never really told anything about it. There's a book that I did with my son, and it's simple. It's called Sons Love Drawing Mutant Robot Battles with Dads. And it's really more of a fun project with him. So yeah, we just drawn a whole bunch of just crazy pictures of like aliens and robots fighting. And we took some pictures, put them into a book, and a very simple story. It's basically, I think mostly for parents, kind of lighten up, play with your kids. It can be simple. And if you're drawing with them, just make like shooting sounds. And I actually don't know if anyone ever bought it. I never really told many people about it because it's mostly to show my son. It's like a project with him, and I gave him a copy, and then that was the point of it. So it was really mostly for him and for me. But that's a funny book. That was fine.
And one thing, I'm sorry for making a personal question here, but
yeah, that's fine.
One thing I really admire, and I got really impressed by how do you value your family, and how do you have a very large family and you interact with all of them often. I watch it from my Instagram account. How do you balance work and family these days?
So for me, I use the word juggle. Then I don't really use the word balance because I feel like I really don't have balance in my life. I wake up at 6 in the morning, and I'm often up until 10 or 11 or 12 at night between because we have young kids, family, school. I try to exercise. I need to get better because.
How many today? 9?
We have 9 kids.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's a lot. I don't, by the way, I'm not saying I up at 6 and sleep late to brag, because I don't like that part. I don't get enough rest. I don't get enough time to feel like I can play the guitar. But the thing is, for me, like having things like that, having the family, something I care so much about. And it's funny because before I got married, I got married about 10 years ago. before that, it wasn't really that a priority. But once I somehow got married and had kids, just everything changed. So that's the real motivation for me, is having kids, having a big family. And that's actually also what drives my work, because we have a big family, big bills. I have to make a lot of money. I started Salesforce early, but I didn't really get any equity there. So I didn't make much money at Salesforce. And it's been it's like it's the fire under my butt to be a better person, be a better business person, be a better family person, having a big family. So, and I can't imagine not having one now.
No, it inspires me, and I really love watching it from my Instagram account. It seems like a big happy family. Congratulations.
Yeah, no, it's a great family. I mean, look, we always have our own. There's always like drama and problems, things, but overall, like, it's a great family, great kids. There's always some kid every day that just want to, like, but the next day, it's just always up and down a family,
Or which one is a salesperson in progress?
We have at least one of them so far. 17-year-old Aurora is definitely like salesperson in progress, or marketing person. Yeah. So but yeah, I don't know. And then it's a great family. I'm glad we have 7 of them here in Edinburgh. 2 of the teenagers who don't want to be here. They want to be at boarding school, but the pandemic, it's just so. But it's a great family. I'm very lucky.
Great. So going back to sales again here, Daniel has a question on what are the right steps to defining assertive sales goals, sales targets?
Well, that's kind of a broad question. What I'd say is, like, setting goals is very challenging. There's 2 kinds. You can set goals when you're in a business and you have a bit of a track record. Like, you kind of know what's happened in the past. You can set goals with more confidence and feel like, okay, I have a high confidence, either I'll kind of know if I'll hit that or not. But if you're in an earlier stage company, or if you're a big company doing something new and you're guessing, and sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you just take a guess, and you know what? It's not about hitting the goal. It's about learning as much as you can on the way to that goal. And so I think, again, if you are someone who's senior and you have to use goals that are guesses, you really can't punish people for not hitting those goals. You can punish them or yourself for not learning. But so I'll give you one example: is if a company's creating a new kind of sales team, or maybe they're creating a new outbound team, and they don't have a track record for compensation, then you're pretty much not going to be successful if you try to create a comp plan from day one and hold them to it. Because either it's going to be too hard and they're not going to be able to get it to it all, and so they'll be upset, or it'll be too easy and they'll just like crush it, and then you're going to change the plan on them because you don't want them making that much money, and then they're going to be upset. So it's much better to have, even like a 2-month period or 3 months to kind of get some experience, get some data before you try to create an assertive sales goal for the future.
So if I'm a startup and I have some, let's say, hypotheses on pricing, and I have sold a few deals, but I have no funnel metrics, what would be the approach you would take for the first 6 months scaling a sales organization?
I feel like Jason Lemkin wrote a great post about that kind of sales comp plan. I don't remember what the structure was. So what I would probably do is go back and look up, so Jason Lemkin is the founder of SaaStr. I would probably go to SaaStr.com and look up his posts on sales comp plans. I know there was one, like you said, for an early stage company, first salesperson, first sales comp plan that he really liked. So that's what I would do. I'd go to Jason Lemkin. Yeah, but I think so that's one answer. The other answer is making sure that you're hiring people that you can work with, right? Because it's not always going to be smooth. There's always going to be a lot of problems. And so you need to have a team or people that you feel like you can be open and honest with to work through the problems. And so if you've got that, then as you go, just knowing kind of that communication with them is, we don't really know what we're doing, but we're going to pick a goal and go for it. And we're going to learn together on the way. And then once we get there, we'll, pick a next one. So it's just like that people, the teamwork, the trust, the alignment, that's really the foundation of your business. Not to forget that. The plan's going to change. Like the comp plan's going to change. The comp plans are never last forever. So don't forget your people.
Yeah, no, totally. I think in the early days, you have to be flexible and be upfront, share with everyone. We still don't know. We are researching here. We're gonna make changes and learn, but it's an experimentation. Like those are funny times, the early days. And what have you been up to lately? New book coming, lots of projects. Can you share a little bit?
Where do I start? Well, and there's always a lot of things, but I'm excited. We finally got the URL, heysieteprovisivel.com. All right, so we're going to be creating a lot of more content for that site. That's going to be the new kind of business name and content site for us. Alongside, there's a new edition of Hey Siete Previsivel, the book coming out, a new edition of Hyper Crescimento coming out. So that's in Brazil. And one other thing that's really exciting in Brazil, I've joined the board of a company called Keretsu. The name is going to change, but it's a company that's looking to acquire, let's just say 20 or 30, a bunch of SaaS companies in Brazil into one, into kind of a portfolio and try to and just grow fast in Brazil. So that's exciting because to me, it's interesting. It's the first chance to create what I think of as a sales operating system to help companies have more standards in the way that sales and marketing works across them. Right now, everything is just too customized. It's people can create, everything gets recreated and customized, but it doesn't have to be.
Got it. Yeah, I agree. And any other projects that you're working in? Is there going to be a third or a fourth book?
I keep thinking about another book. I've been thinking about one called Unique Genius, by helping people find that, your unique genius and express that in the world. So I really, especially think too, most companies, if you're not putting your founder or your CEO into your marketing, you're just missing a huge, that's your biggest missed opportunity in marketing. That's one example. But I'm not sure. We have, I just moved to Europe, so I've been doing a lot more in Europe, just from marketing and talking to people, expanding the business here. But we have, just for now, between the pandemic and kids starting school and my wife, we have enough in the family area to do that. I know it's never boring here, but there's not necessarily yet. I think in a few months, I'm hoping to announce something, but there's not necessarily any kind of exciting new programs quite yet that I'm willing to talk about. But we'll see in the new year.
Good to know. Always curious.
Well, I'm hoping to do with either Cisco and or Microsoft a test project on the new kind of services thing. But first, we got to do it and see if it works, and then we'll go from there.
Got it. So for closing remarks here, I'm curious to know, as we spoke in the beginning and we evolved, sales and marketing are evolving very fast. Specialization and nailing your message, focusing on gathering attention is one of those timeless things. Any other advice or what could I know this might sound very generic and I'm sorry if it does, but what can I do to bulletproof my marketing and sales orgs to ensure that they keep always adjusting, like the example you brought from Salesforce, the people remain?
Yeah, well, I think one thing, so I'll probably give you two, though. One, I'm gonna say it again, is that when you can specialize your salespeople, your people, and they can do fewer things better, it's gonna make it easier for them and the team to adapt to changes in the market. So that's one thing. And then if you can, one thing that no matter what happens with the markets, if you can create more trust and brand connection to your customers or partners or your community, that will help. So what that typically looks like is if people trust you as a person or as your company's brand, they're going to give you more leeway to get things wrong and to kind of test things. So one of the ways, so I would say, well, first, make sure that you and your team are having open and honest conversations about what's working. So I think most companies, you should bring in, if you haven't, bring in some sort of third-party coach to come in and just talk to the team and see if are there any serious issues that people aren't talking about. Right? We did that at predictablerevenue.com, and it's been great. So internally, you just can't really do. It's hard to do it yourself. And then, how can you put more of your own personality, especially if you're a founder, or your people, into your marketing and communications to your customers? Because that'll help create stronger relationships with them. So again, whatever happens in the market, the stronger your relationships with your customers and your people will create a lot more resiliency for your company.
Got it. Thanks so much for joining us today, Aaron. What are the best ways to follow you, to connect with you?
One of the best ways is on LinkedIn, right? Probably not hard to find. Or hit me up at predictable. Sorry, say hey CAT. It's going to be heycat@predictablerevenue.com, which is our actually site in Brazil, our team in Brazil.
Thank you. It was great having you. We will be publishing this on our Interactive Jam Sessions Hub, interactive.rockcontent.com/jam sessions. Our next interview is with Joe Chernov, a great marketer.
Yeah, I like Joe. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Aaron. Bye-bye.
Yeah, Diego. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.